Chapter 19. Eloise went about her days as usual, except for when she couldn't. They were out of bread, and she refused to return to the bakery. Baking it herself didn't present itself as a viable option, but she was reluctant to place an order. Surely Zeke would be gone by the end of the week, and things would go back to normal. Surely, once he was out of town, she could stop thinking about how comfortable it was to stand with his arm around her, and how natural it had been to have him in her kitchen. Surely she hadn't pretended so far that her heart was bothered by broken promises that hadn't been made. She'd gone and found him a job and a place to stay, and because of it, she wasn't allowed to eat bread. Thankfully, Tobias was busy with a crack in one of the kilns at work and hadn't mentioned the notion of a dinner party again. On Sunday, she sat in her regular seat in church with Tobias on one side and Philip's parents on the other. Luke was not content to sit with any of them. Though he was quiet, he scrambled from Tobias over to Ma Davidson and back again. Eventually, Eloise had enough of the distraction. Tucking him into her lap, she attempted to make him be still. With her mouth at his ear, she shushed him when he squirmed. That lasted all of 20 seconds. He whacked his hands against her arms, kicked his feet in protest, and without warning, let out a high-pitched screech. Eloise clamped her hand over his mouth. When it was clear that the noise was only going to escalate, she shoved him at Tobias at the end of the row, who promptly left the assembly with Luke. Luke screamed the entire walk down the aisle, reaching over Tobias's shoulder for Eloise and calling her name. "Annie Ellie!" The screams were so loud that Pastor Burness stopped his sermon, waiting until Tobias left the building with Luke before starting up again. But Eloise kept her eyes trained on the pulpit, her shoulders stiff. The front door closed behind Tobias, and the noise cut off immediately. Evidently, Luke was pleased to be outside, as the screaming would have only carried through the open windows. The congregation laughed at Pastor Burness, but Eloise hadn't heard the joke. She hadn't been able to focus on the message from the beginning of the service, blaming her distraction on Luke's unrest. Now that he was gone, her thoughts still wouldn't be tamed. Flashes from dreams and memories of Philip kept her mind busy. She pushed down the nightmares and thought instead of the beautiful times they'd shared. The times when he smiled at her when she came into a room. The times he teased her with his black, soot-covered hands. The times his parents welcomed her as a daughter after her parents died. Philip's parents had treated Luke as a grandson and continued to do so now. She wondered what might change in their relationship if she were to marry again. Would Jacob and Florence welcome an addition to their odd family, or would it push them away? Before she could dwell on the hypothetical, it was time to rise for the benediction. Later, standing on the top steps leading out of the church, she spotted Tobias in the yard, enjoying himself in a group that included a handful of men from work, as well as Isaac Sage, the new blacksmith, and Zeke. She scanned the crowd and was not surprised to find Luke with Helen Palmer. Flitting her eyes back to the men, she watched as Marybeth and her friend Caroline edged their way into the circle. She and Caroline were never close friends in school, since Jessica and Eloise had been enough for each other, but Caroline was kind. Her red hair stood out, always brightening a room. Her smile was contagious, and she'd never had anything bad to say about anyone. Tobias rested his hand on Marybeth's back and motioned to Isaac and Zeke, formally introducing them to Caroline. Zeke stepped 1 foot forward and offered his hand to Caroline. She laughed at something he said and shook his hand in greeting. Then it was Isaac's turn to meet the ladies. But Eloise found it difficult to take her eyes off Zeke when Caroline took a couple of steps toward him. Tobias and Marybeth split off with Isaac. Jonas and Charles sauntered away from the yard, and Zeke and Caroline were left together. Zeke seemed to be enjoying himself. He was pleased with Caroline's attention, and from what Eloise could see by the way his hands elaborated, he was in the middle of an exciting story. When the wind took a feather from Caroline's hat, Zeke jumped and caught the escaped embellishment, returning it to her with an exaggerated sense of achievement. Eloise rolled her eyes. Working at a dress shop, Caroline should have taken care to secure the feathers properly. She had probably orchestrated the whole thing, vying for a man's attention.
"Mrs. Davidson?"
the pastor said. Eloise startled at his nearness and blushed for having been caught thinking undeserved ill thoughts toward Caroline. "Good morning, Pastor Burness. Wonderful message today. Thank you for sharing it with us," though she couldn't have repeated any of his main points.
"It's always a joy to share from the book of Isaiah. I plan to continue the series throughout the spring season."
"Wonderful." Eloise pasted on a smile. Pastor Burness followed Eloise's gaze in the direction of Zeke and Caroline.
"Be sure to let Mr. James know we expect him at the church picnic this afternoon."
"He isn't staying," Eloise blurted. She must have completely missed the announcements about the picnic, too. "Remind me again who's hosting?"
"We are gathering at the Jenkins orchard, 4:00.
"Of course," she said. The orchard would be beautiful. It wasn't a large production, but an array of plum, apple, and pear trees supplied the produce market with an abundance of fruit each fall. Since she and Tobias didn't grow much of their own food, it was wonderful to be able to purchase so many things locally.
"Surely Mr. James wouldn't turn down a church picnic with you."
His eyes twinkled at her. Why did Pastor Burness put them together? She had not had any interaction with the man since he snubbed her last Tuesday at Anderson's Bakery and her discovery of Rachel's letter. "I'm surprised to see Zeke today. Assumed he would be long gone by now. The way he talks, he will likely be on his way tomorrow. He will have many things to prepare." If Pastor Burness wanted Zeke at a picnic, he'd have to invite him himself.
"Is that so? Oscar was telling me he planned to keep him on long term. By all accounts, Mr. James' work at the bakery has exceeded their expectations. I suppose we have you to thank for the new menu items."
He rubbed his stomach and then leaned in as if sharing a secret.
"They told me all about the unfortunate misunderstanding with your brother."
Pastor Burness laughed, shaking his head.
"Such an interesting turn of events. It will all work out in the end. It usually does."
Unless it didn't. Eloise was inclined to believe in things not working out. The disappointment didn't sting so badly when you'd been expecting it all along. Was it possible that Zeke had changed his mind since she'd spoken to him last Sunday? Not that it mattered. He could stay or go regardless. A man receiving love letters from another woman did not hold her interest. Caroline took Zeke's arm and they walked out of the churchyard together. Eloise straightened her shoulders and turned her head away. Pastor Burness could rest easy. Zeke was surely invited to the picnic now. Best of luck to Caroline. Zeke was a waste of time anyway. The sooner he left town, the better. Once he was gone, she'd be able to think clearly again. She couldn't put two thoughts together with him always underfoot. And she still needed to buy bread.
"Ready to go?"
Tobias was at her elbow with Luke on his shoulders. "More than ready," Eloise mumbled. While descending the stairs, she took one last look at Zeke walking away with Caroline. Eloise almost fell off the last step when she found Zeke watching her. He smiled and started to wave, but she turned away, pretending she hadn't noticed. Home awaited. They had leftovers to eat and potato salad to prepare for a picnic that she'd completely forgotten about. The sooner Zeke left town, the sooner she could stop being bothered by him.
Caroline Jenkins was a fun distraction. She laughed easily, smiled at Zeke's jokes, and was extremely pleasant to be around. There was no reason for his mind to keep straying to Eloise. He had done well in avoiding Eloise throughout the week. At first he was afraid she had read too much into their walk together, but when she hadn't approached him, save the one day at the bakery, he had been able to relax. He was not what Eloise needed, and the sooner he was out of her life, the better. "Pardon?" he asked for the third time since he and Caroline had left the churchyard. Caroline stopped and removed her arm from his, and smiled. She said,
"I think I will hurry back home now. I wager you have other things on your mind."
The bakery was en route to her home, and he could see her parents and siblings walking ahead. "I'm sorry," he said. "I must be tired. Thank you for the company." He laughed and gestured to the back door of the bakery, "and for escorting me home."
"My pleasure. We'll see you this afternoon?"
"Absolutely." Her red hair reflected the sunlight as she turned to face her family.
Follow this road out of town and turn left at the large cottonwood near the creek. You can't miss our place. It's the one that will have all the people gathered around the food with the horses and wagons hitched by the barn.
I'll follow my nose, she giggled.
Bye then.
Letting himself into the living quarters of the bakery behind the shop, he was welcomed with the ever-present smell of caramelized sugar, cardamom, and freshly baked bread. Even on a Sunday when the ovens rested, the smell lingered, making it a nice place to sleep for a few days, or weeks. The 50-pound bags of flour Oscar had him rearranging and the combined hours of kneading dough throughout the week had kept his middle from growing, even with the extra taste tests. The Andersons had a plate waiting for him at their table, and a lunch that included Swedish knäckebröd, hard bread, spread with soft cheese, boiled eggs, and pickles. It was no fried chicken, but it satisfied nonetheless.
Those pies you made on Thursday? I have 2 left over for you to bring to the Jenkins picnic,
said Agnes once the meal was over. You're not going? Zeke asked. Oscar chuckled. You'll not catch me awake past 5 o'clock with work waiting the next day. We're too old for such goings-on. 3 o'clock in the morning did arrive much too soon for Zeke's preference, but with an entire display to refill after a day of rest, the early rise was necessary.
You go and have fun, Kit,
Agnes said.
You've got the rest of your life to sleep.
Zeke crunched a bite of the knäckebröd, and crumbs spilled over his plate. He still hadn't gotten the hang of this dry food. I really ought to think about moving on. Susie girl is ready to go. An afternoon jog for exercise might be enough for her, but it's time to put her new shoe to the test. Agnes and Oscar shared a look. It didn't mean much to him, but he recognized from the way they shared a smile that the look was significant. Okay, Zeke said. Out with it. He put his bread down and brushed the excess crumbs from his chest. What have I done this time? He drummed his fingers on either side of the plate. I didn't let mice in the flour bin again, did I? If I did, you need to take it out of my wages. I ought to know better than to repeat an offense like that. Oscar waved a hand at him. No. The mice have nothing to do with anything. He looked again at Agnes. We've been talking, Agnes and I, and we're ready to offer you a full-time position here, if you're inclined. You know your way around the kitchen, and whatever your thoughts on the matter, you have a gift. We'd hate to see it go to waste. You can stay here, renting a room for as long as you want, and if you decide to get your own place later, then that's something we can talk about. Agnes and I have been running this bakery, just the 2 of us, since we started, and having another pair of hands has been more helpful than you know. It's been a real blessing. Besides, with the extra menu items and you being new and all, we've had a surge of customers that have more than covered your wages. Zeke wanted to interject. He was going west, to the ocean. He had plans to keep following the sun, so that he could... What? So that he could say he went west? Followed his dreams of seeing the ocean? Because he wanted to do something with his life? Because he didn't want to be a farmer? Did he want to be a baker? Oscar was still talking. There are a few specials I'd like to add to our menu, and take more time to prepare, but could be offered with our regular items now that you're here. You can continue your training on traditional Swedish offerings, but so far our customers have nothing but good things to say about your work. Those cinnamon rolls were a hit right out of the gate.
Close your mouth, Zeke dear,
Agnes said.
It's not becoming.
He clamped his mouth shut as thoughts bounced around in his mind. Agnes leaned forward.
You don't have to answer right off. You can take another week, or however long you need to decide. Just understand that you are welcome here. We enjoy having you underfoot, even if you let mice into the flour bin on occasion.
She smiled.
We've enjoyed having you as a part of our family, and we're glad to have known you, whether or not you decide to make Okelbo your home.
He nodded. His mouth was suddenly dry. Family. Home. 2 words that he yearned for, and for the first time, he realized he was scared. Family and home meant commitment. It meant sticking around for someone else and being responsible for them, as they were for him. It meant people caring if he stayed or left. Home was a place of safety, where he could let his guard down. Family loved each other through thick and thin, and then died. Opening himself up to that kind of pain was dangerous. It would be much easier to be the one leaving instead of the one being left. He'd had a home and family with the Donnellys. They had loved him as their own, but he'd managed to protect his heart from feeling the kind of love he'd only had with his mother. Except for Rachel. A better sister didn't exist. She'd taken him under her wing from the first day he showed up, hungry, with holes in the knees of his pants. He loved Rachel deeply, as he could imagine one loved an older sister, but when she and Daniel Reese had set a date for their wedding, it was past time for Zeke to find his own adventure. She didn't need him anymore. She was 14 and he 12 when he joined their family, and she'd never left him alone a day in his life since. She'd taught him everything there was to know about what it meant to be part of a family. It meant loving each other on the hard days and the good days, and it meant forgiveness after uncalled-for anger, laughing so hard his sides ached, and crying so the tears poured like rain. She'd been there through all those hard years, and he wasn't about to sit back and watch the family break off one by one while he was stuck plowing fields. The West dangled in front of him, teasing him with stories of adventure and feats of heroism. He furrowed his brows, deep in thought. But being a baker? Where was the adventure in that? He watched Oscar take Agnes's hand and raise it to his lips, seeming to read the other's mind.
"Come on, old boy,"
Agnes said to Oscar.
"let's have a walk.
She winked at Zeke.
Zeke is happy to clear the table."